For us to understand the protocols, we must first make a clear definition of them. As we have learned through the virtual sessions which were held in this course and the literature proposed by it, we can get to the idea that a protocol is a technical procedure which presents us a set of rules and tools about how to behave in a proper way when dealing with a specific culture. However, this set of rules and tools must not be applied indiscriminately for every approach with that specific culture, but has to be carefully analyzed case by case in order to integrate it with the tactics and the strategies we are bringing to that cross-cultural negotiation. The range of rules presented by protocols comprise topics such as business etiquette, time sensitivity, communication context, and emotionalism, and it's up to the negotiator how to use those rules to his advantage. As I explained earlier, every case of intercultural negotiation is different and must be analyzed through a different pair of lenses each. This in order to avoid misreadings of the other party's position, to overcome the obstacles for a fluid communication, to cope with the other party's culture in a respectful way, and finally to get the best outcome of the negotiation process. There are two main moments when a negotiator can and must analyze the other party: prior the negotiation and during the negotiation. In the pre-negotiation stage, we propose to use as a guide the 4 rules for coping with cultural differences in negotiation presented by Salacuse in the chapter 9 of his book. These rules will help us to get acquainted with the other side's culture and to find the key aspects that we can use from the protocols to include in our negotiation strategy. These rules are: learn the other side's culture, don't stereotype, be aware of your own culture and how others may perceive it, and find ways to bridge the cultural gap. We'll explain each of them. Learn the other side's culture. This can be done by reviewing the key aspects of that culture: history, manners, social structure, political situation, religion, and communication context. Of course, a useful method to frame a culture can be the definition of the cultural dimensions proposed by Hofstede, such as power distance, uncertainty avoidance, individualism, masculinity, and time orientation, mentioned by Peleckis in his journal article. The information gathered about the other side's culture will help us to define the behavior of the counterpart in some of objective aspects that will help us to create a framework of that culture. Once that framework is defined, we can integrate the corresponding protocol to our strategy and therefore to our tactics. Don't stereotype. For us, it is the most important rule of all 4, because protocols may be general to some extent, and negotiators must keep in mind that the counterpart is not a group of cultural robots whose all members will respond in the same exact way as the protocols describe. In this point, it is very useful to lean on the method of the strategic choice presented in the chapter 2 of Salacuse's book, where it is recommended to anticipate where my actions will lead me and what reactions, strategies, and tactics will the other side take in response to my statements and actions. In doing this, we must consider that every individual has a unique personality and a personal negotiating style. Be aware of your own culture and how others may perceive it. As stated in chapter 4 of Salacuse's book, we must evaluate the specific resources we have that may influence the other party on a given issue, and we must be conscious about how the other party perceives my culture and my relative power of negotiation. It will be useful to apply the protocols to our favor by integrating them in our grand power strategy. Find ways to bridge the cultural gap. When dealing with people from a different culture than ours, a very common tactic to approach is by searching a historical connection, a mutual friend, or a similar cultural dimension upon which to build a bridge. This bridge building begins when you start to see the person you are negotiating with not as a faceless counterpart or rigid stereotype, but as a complex individual with distinct interests, concerns, and origins. So in the process of building a cultural bridge, you can certainly use protocol rules that are similar to both cultures and use them as a connection to get acquainted with each other, or also through a different common element you can get to prove protocol rules right or wrong without having negative impact in your negotiation. Finally, in the second moment where a negotiation can analyze the counterpart that is while being in the middle of the negotiation, We must emphasize that according to Salacuse, negotiations are all about interests, and in cross-cultural negotiation we must keep that tendency too. This tendency to follow the interests will guide the process, and so as a golden rule to apply protocols in a proper way, we suggest that the negotiation must uncover and discuss the real interests of the counterpart and measure the impact of its actions on the other party's perceptions and strategies, as indicated in the section The Art of the Strategic Choice of the chapter 2 of Salacuse book. This part will lead us to use three main questions to know about the other party's interests. The three questions that we must keep in mind to know the other party's interests are: in light of their interest, how will the other side interpret my actions and statements? What strategies, tactics, and actions will take the other side in order to respond to my statements and actions? And what should I then be prepared to do in response to the other side's reactions? It's in the third question that we can integrate the protocols to our advantage, while we find innovative ways to respond to the reactions of our counterpart.
Hello, my name is Andres Beltrán. I'm a student of the Supply Chain Management Magister. Today I'm going to talk about international negotiation and protocols and how these were applied into a certain negotiation involving a Colombian company and a South African company. Working in a multinational organization implies different types of scenarios that every supply manager eventually will have to face. I want to talk to you about two common situations that involves international and cross-cultural negotiation, because the confectionery industry may be known as simple one, but it has its own mysteries. Even though raw materials may appear very common and easy to get, this could not be that simple in reality. It is true that sugar is the principal raw material, but it's important to remark that 87% of the total sugar production is focused on just 15 countries. So occasionally, confectionery manufacturers will face negotiation against powerful and traditional oligopolies. This, combined with inner politics, may change the general scenario, even though the sugar international price is set by the market. Sometimes these prices doesn't apply to certain economies because of protectionism and low risk government politics. Same wise happens with other raw materials. Some are even more difficult to get in spite of its simple process of manufacturing. Offer of certain goods is limited because of the nature of the market. So planning and supply plays an important role in ensuring the continuity of the supply flow and the best form to recover negotiating strength against powerful oligopolies. Other situations that managers will face are mergers, hostile takeovers, and gentler purchases, especially in open markets and in different sides of the negotiating table. Couple of years back, a Colombian confectionery company was forced to look for different ways to enter South African market. Back in 2010, a South African distributor was one of the best clients of the company, but an announce of an increase on the import duty for candies for 37% plus the 14% for regular trade tax made unsustainable the relationship the way it was. A proposal from the South African client opened a new stage of the business, where the Colombian company would be able to manufacture inside South Africa, expanding its reach, increasing its production, and gaining recognition and brand value. But the other side of the proposal was a new associate, something absolutely new for the Colombian owners who had built the company from nothing through a family business and traditionally were very reserved for this type of proposals. The situation was a very particular one. Two parties that used to benefit from a profitable business of manufacturing and exporting to South Africa for retail with a deadline because of the new government policy, threatening the possibility to continue this commercial relationship. The decisions to make were the following: give up to a profitable business for both parties or somehow figure a negotiated output that allows the business to survive, ensuring most of the benefits possible for both parties. A business trip to South Africa was the way to seal the deal. Both parties knew themselves for almost 12 years, so a trustful relationship was the base for the process of building a confectionery plant in South Africa. The inexperience for both sides of the deal will play an important role in the business, so that 3 years later still brings some issues and details to discussion. According to Salacuse, some tactics should be developed into a negotiation. So I'm about to explain how these tactics were held by the Colombian company to try to prevail its interest over his business associate, always starting from a good faith. The first one is power preparation. So when the Colombian businessmen were invited to South Africa to meet with their future partner, they had to prepare themselves into all the information relevant to the business they were going to talk about. For example, capital available, expectations, decision making, control and verification, implementation, construction of the production line, employee training, suppliers market, creditors market, etc. The next one tactic is where to negotiate. The place took an important role because the place was South Africa. It gave an extra leverage to the South African businessman to balance the negotiation into his favor, although he looked to that opportunity to bond with his future partners because of his culture as Indian, and they take very important. They think it's very important the manners and the relationship between associates. The next tactic is opening moves. The Colombian investor knew how important it was for his future associate the trust and family bond, so his move was to take all his close family to the trip with him. This was a clear message of the commitment he was assuming, and the South African businessmen understood this move as a show of respect and trust that made more desirable the merge. Next tactic is getting little help from friends. Colombia company has over 60 years in experience in the market of manufacturing candies, so it has a lot of allies, not only in Colombia but worldwide, that will help also for the relationship of the merge in South Africa. So bringing this folder of allies, it was a remarkable presentation letter and a move that showed the businessman that shows him it was a good faith and built confidence in the counterpart. The next tactic is finding the right voice. For the South African businessman, it's very important cultural values like respect, trust, honesty, and loyalty. Because the Colombian managers is older, the relationship is leaning to one side. But the important thing here is that he doesn't take advantage of this situation, but used it to take in his new associate. Paying back all these concessions that the South African manager did was a gesture that sealed the deal. And the next and last one is ways to close the deal. After tying emotional bond, a contract was the easy part to get everything settled. Since most of the deal was overwhelmed by personal and emotional reasons, the signed contract remained very general and included just big picture stuff like participation, ownership, leverage, and legal responsibilities. For future experiences, a more detailed arrangement is required. These were some experiences that were applied into a Colombian candy manufacturer company and a South African retail sales company to build a new plant in South Africa, where they figured it out to overcome a huge challenge that may happen again in other countries where Colombia and this new company will export. Thank you for your attention. I hope you had liked the presentation. If you have any comments, I will be pleased to answer them. Goodbye.